Tuesday, November 16th, and we're going to talk about End of Shadow Club to get ourselves ready for the test coming up tomorrow. Let's see, and possibly even give you guys some practice questions because I ended up writing more than I wanted to use. I ended up using only 25 questions on the test. This is going to be a total of 50 points, and that'll cover end of book and all of that tomorrow. Thursday, you'll turn in the book on Thursday. You'll keep the book tomorrow, and then turn in book Thursday, and I'll take them from you then. And then Thursday, we get to begin beginning poetry. And so much like everything else we've done, it's going to be awesome because it's a lot like novels, but shorter. And it's like short stories, but shorter. And so you have to read, but reading a lot less. It requires you to sort of like understand the bits that go into it. We're not doing a lot of you guys writing poetry. It's just like we didn't have you guys write novels and didn't have you guys write short stories. It's more just the reading and the understanding. And so we'll get into that coming up on Thursday of this week. And then Canned Food Drive ends on Friday. Quick question. For any of you guys, are your best talking about the Canned Food Drive?
No.
Interesting. All right. Well, apparently my class is going to win because we have 15, which apparently is 15 more than all the other classes. So, yay! So that's something. But beyond that, I was just sort of curious to see how classes were doing. And mine has not brought in a ton, but they've brought in more than 0, so that's something.
I'm gonna bring
That, and then there, and then... This is the different missing homeworky things that go into it. Again, if you turn them in, I'm more than happy to grade them. Eventually, I'll start emailing your parents and finding other creative ways to try and torture you and make you a better person. Speaking of torturing kids, what's up?
Oh, it was with the poetry. Are we gonna read Where the Sidewalk Ends? Those type of poems, because those are
Dev?
When do we start reading the second book?
We don't.
There is no second book.
There is.
There is.
If you read more,
Just gives you more homework to not do in the future.
Yeah, because it's an epic.
Miles. Okay. Then as far as e-learning goes from Friday, I enjoyed going over and reading what you guys submitted. As much as you guys harassed me during short stories about the fact that I chose short stories that dealt with death and destruction, here I gave you guys a question that said, what was your favorite part of the book? And there are happy parts of this book. The vast majority of you didn't choose those. For your favorite parts, it was kids getting hurt, kids getting tortured, bad things happening. So there are scenes where like Cheryl and Jared and talk and say happy things. Nope. I was like, there was no part where you guys chose that. You're like, death and destruction and hurting. Yeah! And so this is where I get to figure out what it is you want, and that's what I try to aim for. Can I find poems that deal with that? The answer is yeah. Are we going to read poems like that? Yeah, because apparently that's what you twisted little monkeys like. So I'm here to serve my twisted little monkeys to help you out. Oh, and then also you guys can't really see it nearly as well. Hang on 1 second. And so you can't really see it on the screen as well. If I tilt it forward, I have carpet is what you're seeing down there in that little carpet. For those of you who are the real human versions, I do have carpet around my home children. You can also see I do have small decoration up and decoration over yonder. I'm not done yet, or anywhere close to with my decorating. Down near the ground, and in this video you can see down near the ground, I'm missing the edging that goes between the carpet and the wall, the baseboard stuff. So once they have that in, I get permission to finish. And at some point I get to have like whiteboards and bulletin boards installed, which I don't have yet. I think they're on a boat somewhere in the middle of the Pacific or something. So I can decorate my ceiling though, which is why I've started hanging things from my ceiling, because that I have gotten clearance to do. So yay, small win. So that's why I have the giant moon wearing a sombrero, not a banana, unless that just brings you joy. But yeah, it's a moon. It was a thing that a kid won in some like carnival contest. It's got a little cow jumping over it and stuff like that. So that's what we have for that one. Hopefully tomorrow there'll be even more hanging on the ceiling, and then each day I'll keep trying to add more and more as it goes along. And then someday we'll have stuff on the wall, so it's not just a big boring box of whiteness. Eli?
Okay, so on my answer for like my favorite scene, so instead of you know how Vera went down the hill.
You put that on there, and I replied to it.
Yes, and I said Vicky.
Yeah, I know.
Instead.
I replied to it.
I didn't see the reply.
That's okay.
But it didn't take place.
That's why I replied to it. Kira?
Look at it.
So,
Sure.
my favorite part of the book wasn't exactly death. It was despair and misery.
Same idea.
Not
Same
exactly.
family.
I mean, no one died. Someone wanted to die.
Lillian?
Somebody died.
2 questions. 1, can I be here for best?
In my class for best? See me after class? I have no idea.
Okay. Question 2. You said you can hang things on the ceiling now. Can that include me?
Jameson?
Okay, so for those who don't know, apparently Tyson just likes to put things on fire. He was Lighthouse on Fire.
Which we're gonna talk about.
Every drawing he does basically involves like people caught on fire, another stuff caught on fire. Just so you know, Tyson's a bit of a narcissist.
So now as we're going to talk about ending a book and cover the things from there. I'd say you can spoil things, but we've gotten past all the spoiler bits. So now you're clear to spoil it because there's nothing to spoil.
No, they almost
Tyson died and then got brought to life.
Tyson
They
I was just
drowned
joking.
Tyson.
You guys got really excited there. For a
Tyson
moment.
revived.
Yes.
Tyson
Who
did
died?
not die. He almost
No,
died.
he revived. He did not. Tyson died. No.
You lied to us.
He only died.
Again, I've never lied to a smart kid in my life. And then 2, no, Tyson died. We're going to talk about it. They bring him back to life, but it still counts as death. They still poke him with a stick and go, hey, his heart stopped. He's no longer breathing. He's dead. There's just a step that comes after that. I didn't say he died and stayed dead. That's a whole different conversation.
Oh,
All right, so let's go through end of booky things to talk about and help you guys out and answer questions. So that's my picture of Mr. Green, who is going to play a role here in just a moment because he does the confrontation and the fighty bits.
That horrifying picture.
What happened to Girl on Bike?
She busted her head open on the fire hydrant.
What happened to Bike?
It went out of control suddenly.
The brakes did not work.
Someone broke the brakes. Who was riding Bike? That's where the Vera Vasquez ended up hitting curb and hitting her head and stuff like that with my incredibly lifelike picture. And then we got to, after that, who does Jared fight in the hallway?
Tyson.
And then in order to not be heard, where does he drag Tyson? Into the little phone boothy thing, and that's when he yells at him in the phone booth. Now, unfortunately, he cannot get Tyson to confess, which we'll talk more about here in a moment. So, since Tyson refuses to confess, what does Jared yell at him in the hallway?
He's a bedwetter.
Yells out for everyone to know that he's a bedwetter, and then Tyson does not come back to school after that, which we'll eventually get to. What happens with the uniform for Jared? That's when it says gopher on it. And then who is it that Jared gets into a fight with while he's there at the track practice?
Austin.
And then that was the fighting with Austin. What happens to Austin shortly after that? How does he hurt his feet? And this is what really puts Jared over the edge because who does he suspect did it? And this is where he suspects Tyson. And so he decides that he's going to go confront Tyson, but Tyson's not at school. And then the kids just kept yelling at me for some reason. So then, so we got to that part, and there we go. So now I'm going to run through and answer questions as we get to that last bit. Let me cover stuff from there. All right, retro. Did that one, did that one, did that one, and by the way, Lillian, the reason I don't call on you is because I learned after the last question, once you asked the bad question, I don't come back to you, and the hanging yourself from the ceiling one was my way to not go. So I wasn't trying to be mean to you, it's just I don't call on a kid after that. So then at that point, this is where Jared now wants to confront Tyson, but Tyson is nowhere to be found. So Mr. Green, assistant principal, calls him in to confront it. And this is where I, as a teacher, had a problem with the book. Because Mr. Green calls in Jared. He's like, hey, I know the Shadow Club. I know who's in the Shadow Club. I know you're the leader of the Shadow Club. And of course, Jared's like, I don't know what you're talking about. That's ridiculous. And he goes, doesn't matter. It is now time for your beating. And he tells Jared that I am now going to officially do horrible things to you. But first, I need to get all the Shadow Club members in here. So who does Mr. Green send to go get all the Shadow Club members?
Jared.
What teacher in their right mind goes, I'm going to beat you and your friends. Here's a hall pass to go get all of your friends so you can bring them here so I can beat them. So what does Jared do?
He doesn't run away.
Like any normal human. He was like, so if I just run away. Green's like, yeah, but you're not going to do that. And he's like, yeah, I'm not going to do that at all. And then what does he do?
Run away.
Yeah, he's like, dip. He just disappears and takes off running.
No.
Goes and grabs all of his friends like, hey, the principal's going to kill us, so if you'd like to leave. I'm like, yeah, I'm in on that. So they all just take off and run away like, yeah, we're going to avoid getting beat. So they go and they decide they're going to go confront Tyson. Like, hey, let's go beat up Tyson and get a confession from him. And they all agree. Yay, beating up Tyson. And they think it's a wonderful idea.
Because they're good kids.
So at this point, they go and where do they find Tyson?
In his
house.
So in his house, and realize it is a federal crime to break and enter and kidnap. So at this point, if we're chalking up who has committed crimes, it's like the Shadow Club hands down. Because when you show up at someone's house, kick in their door, wrap them up, and drag them out kicking and screaming, yeah, breaking, entering, kidnapping, destruction of property. They're like, check. But we're good kids. And so they drag Tyson all the way back to Stonehenge, and they bring the marionettes, and they try to get Tyson to confess. Will he confess? No. They're like, oh, you're a tough one. And so what happens to the marionettes?
They smashed them.
So again, these are the marionettes, and they look like all the members of the Shadow Club, and they then just trash them all right in front of them. And again, they're not easy to make when they trash all of these marionettes and shred them in front of him. He still won't break. Like, Tyson, that guy's impressive. Oh, they could not find one Shadow Club member. Which person did not come to join them? Randall, they don't know where he is. So Cheryl takes off. He's like, I'm going to go find my brother. They're like, whatevs, go find your brother, that's fine. And so she takes off to go find his brother, and they take Tyson to
The beach.
the beach. And here's, is this where he tells them about swimming?
Uh-huh.
Because what's Tyson's issue with swimming?
He can't swim.
And so that's when they're like, and so they push him into the water, and they do like a little semicircle thing of like, and he's in the middle, and they keep pushing him farther into the water. Will Tyson confess? No. He's like, I won't confess. And like, oh, you rascal Darny. And they keep trying to get him in farther and farther. And then Cheryl shows up and goes, hey, I know where Randall is. And where's Randall been? Hospital. Jared's like, kind of in the middle of killing someone right now. She's like, well, take that time out on killing people. And he's like, oh, man. And so she drags him away. But he goes, hey, Shadow Club, before I come back, you have two things you have to do. Get a confession. And if you don't get a confession, what has to happen?
Kill him.
Those are your two options. Confession or death. And they're like, okay. And then they all go out what he does, and he takes off and goes and meets Randall.
He's in the hospital.
We find out that Randall was hanging out at Eric Kilfoyle's house, the evil basketball player. Are Randall and Eric friends? No. And that's when Jared's like, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And it turns out, why was Randall at Eric's house?
Trying to steal basketball.
And so, who was he going to blame it on?
Red.
No, he was trying to steal the basketball goal. But who was he planning on? So the basketball rim.
Oh, that kid.
The rim. So who was he going to steal the thieving on? Or blame it on?
Tyson.
So he figured, I'll just blame it on Tyson, since Tyson did all these other awful things. We'll blame this on him too. To which Jared's like, so you're going to do a bad thing and blame it on Tyson. Uh-oh. I wonder if anyone else has done such a thing. And he did fell off the garage and like fell on his arm or shoulders.
Yeah.
So then this is when Jared realizes that maybe
None of them actually.
Tyson might not have done the others. So he has an idea. He figures there's a chance he knows who did the rocks in the field, If it wasn't Tyson, it was Cheryl.
What?
So he can't get Cheryl to just confess. So those of you who happen to have a boyfriend or girlfriend, just so you're aware, if you ever accuse them of a crime, it doesn't usually end well for the relationship. When you're like, hey, rumor is you broke the law and you're a horrible person, very seldom they go, yeah, high five. But that's what happens here. He's like, hey, Cheryl, it's okay. I'm all for you putting rocks in the field. I know you did it. Let's high five each other. And she's like, what? I would never do that. He's like, no, we're all good. And she's like, yeah, it was me. That was a great trick. And at this point, Jared realizes, oh, snap. I left the Shadow Club behind with the directions to get a confession or kill Tyson.
No, he just said a confession.
A confession. Didn't say anything about killing Tyson?
No.
But he did leave them in the water knowing that he can't swim?
Yes.
I'm going to go with this an implied kill Tyson. So Tyson can't confess. So what's the other thing that's going to happen?
Kill it.
And that's when Jared's like, no, and he takes off running. He gets, let's see, hang on, running. So who did the rocks in the field?
Cheryl. Me.
Miles.
They should make like another book of this. I survived the attack of the shadow.
I mean, there is a second book. We can
No,
talk
I know,
about
but
it.
I survived about it.
So at this point, he gets back to, I think they're at Stonehenge. I think is where he finds them. And he finds the Shadow Club members who are really soggy and no Tyson. And he's like, hey, how are you doing? And they're like, not so well.
He's not breathing.
There may have been a problem. And he was like, where's Tyson? Like, about that. Remember Tyson? He's like, why are you doing the thing? And so that's when they admit, so we were doing the thing with the water and it was going all splash, splash, and things were going wonderfully. And then one of the times the wave went splash and then the wave disappeared.
And it came back.
And there was no more Tyson.
No. We confessed something.
We're going to come to that part. I was just sort of skipping over that for now, but we're going to get to the confession. That's, you are correct. Fine. Before
Of the fire.
he does confess to something, just not what they were expecting. What does he confess to?
Fire. School.
So he did set all the fires at school, which
Parents died in a fire.
didn't make them happy because like, what about all those firemen who got hurt and stuff like that? It's like, oh my God, you're still evil. And that's when they still continue to sort of go marchy. Wave hits them. Whoop, Tyson disappears. And they're like, yay, problem solved. No more Tyson. Let's go home and have popcorn.
They got worried.
But yeah, that was the problem. They realized that you probably just got done killing a person, and they tend to frown on that. But luckily, they find Tyson
Dead.
floating. They're like, oh, look at that. He's breathing water. That's impressive. And they drag him out, and that's when they like poke him with a stick. And they're like, I don't think he's breathing. They're like, yeah, that's because he's dead. And so at that point, in that moment, Tyson is dead. But apparently, they don't want to have a murder charge. So they solve the problem. Well, one of them solves the problem. Which one of them solves it? And what does OP do? Apparently, she really likes letters. Because she's like, OP, CPR, yay! Like a cheerleader. And so that's when she does the whole, live! Live! He's alive! And he pops up. And of course, ironically, how does Tyson thank them upon being brought back to life?
He also runs away and runs.
Yeah, he's like, thank you! They're like, that's the worst thank you ever! And takes, I know, right? You save a person and they chuck a rock at you.
Well, he was cursing and didn't understand.
Right, I mean, just because you tried to kill him first, like forgive and forget. But apparently we have issues. And so that's when Jared's like, well, where did he go? And they're like,
into the forest.
like into the, where would you go when you just got brought back to life with a bunch of crazy monkeys that tried to kill you? And he's like, I think he went home.
He went home.
And he does go home.
And burns his whole
And when
house.
Jared gets there to apologize, because Jared's like, I'm going to go say I'm sorry. He shows up, and what's going on with the light? And that's when the fire's going on.
This is my favorite scene.
That's when the fire's going on. And so at this point, Jared's like, oh snap, this is double bad because we just killed him, and now we brought him back to life, and now he's going to die again. and burning down a thing. And so he goes in there to try and save Tyson, confronts Tyson, and is like, hey, there's an exit. Does Tyson go to the exit?
No, it throws a brick at his head.
He does. Which direction does he go instead?
The other way.
He goes higher into the whole thing. And he runs up to the top. And Jared's like, seriously? Oh. And then he runs up top with him. In the process of apparently almost dying, Jared joins a club. And what club does Jared join? It's not a bed. There you go. He could lay down and pee in a bed, but it's kind of awkward. But he definitely, I'm assuming when he peed his pants, he was trying to put out the fire. And he was failed epically at it. And he was like, I tried to put it out. I just put out the fire right here. And so they get all the way up to the top part. And that's when they're getting ready to almost do the deathy bits. And then they come up with a plan to not do the deathy bits.
Jump into the water.
And that's when they go,
But they actually
But they hit the side.
and they jump straight out. And that's when they try to not do the deathy bits. And then they jump, splash.
How do you jump
No,
that
they
far?
hit the water.
Well, luckily, it's water. It's like going off a high dive. Or it's a book, so it's make-believe. So you can kind of do whatever you want. And then that problem is that, again, Tyson can't swim.
Didn't they hit the
So
rocks?
that's the
Yeah,
they
they
after they hit the rocks, like
slide.
on the swimming back, they have their little rock issue from
If
there.
they hit the rocks, they'd be.
Miles,
Doesn't Tyson say that he started that?
and that's what I was going to get to. So as we get to the end of it for the whole fire thing, as we find out more about Tyson, we find out his parents died in a fire. Not just they died in a fire, who set the fire?
Tyson.
And so we find out that, and so apparently when Tyson, and he didn't do it to like be mean to them. He wasn't like, die, and come after them. It was that whole don't let little kids play with matches. And Tyson was like 4 or 5 years old and playing with matches, dropped one, and the house caught on fire, and then it kills his parents, which is horrifying. And apparently that impacts a kid and gives them trauma. And so this is the trauma he has now been dealing with, which is why he has the bedwetting thing. Because when you survive a fire that kills your parents, probably going to impact your mental bit a bit. Which then is why Mr. Green and that confrontation with Jared, he's like, a lot of people have been doing a lot of work to try and help Tyson, and you just set it all back by screaming bedwetter at him in the hallway. Because from Mr. Green's point of view, he's been trying to help this kid heal from this horrible event, and then in comes Jared, who just becomes like a complete jerkhole. So yeah, we find out that Tyson has that issue. End of book. Then they finish out, and then if you saw at the very end of it, there is the first part. There is a sequel to it called Shadow Club Rising. I have the ebook on Canvas. If you don't mind reading on an iPad, it's the same thing. It's on there. I do have paper copies, but I only have 2, and they're both currently checked out. But it is a better book than Shadow Club. The drawback is it doesn't make sense if you've not read Shadow Club, which is why we don't read it as a class, is because I didn't want to make you read one just to get to the other one, but it is definitely a good book. I'm going to tell you the very beginning of it because it's not a spoiler because it's in the first 2 chapters. Jared's family adopts Tyson, and they end up bringing him in. And so it sort of becomes Jared's brother, and a lot of the story is about Jared and Tyson bonding and sort of coming past all these other things. Now, there's a big, horrible thing that happens, and it has nothing to do with all of the first best people. A whole different thing happens in the book. But Tyson plays a huge role in it. He and Jared both do. And Austin's in it. He plays a big role also, but in a whole different way.
Oh yeah, Jared and Austin are friends.
Joseph,
The sequel is in the library.
they do have some copies in the library. I would agree. Dev,
It's so stupid how, bro, Jared, like, almost killed the man. And this stupid little kid who's about to die says, okay, I'll forgive him. Let's be friends. Who in their right mind would think, okay, I'll be friends with the man and his friends that tried to kill me, and I would not be here. Like,
that attitude actually plays a part in the book. That's very similar thinking that happens between... Tyson is not just suddenly turn around and become like a huggy person. It's very similar thinking when the whole thing goes into it. He's like, you want me to come live with you after you ruined my life? But at the same time, there's other things that go into it. But yeah, you're not the only one who would think that. Ish,
Have you read that book?
Yeah, absolutely.
Does another person die or somebody die?
Not like this one. Bad thing. There's a lot more almost deaths that happen in the book, but not quite to the same degree. There's more severe things happen. So if that makes sense, but not to that severity. Miles, Ani.
Who in the world has the patience to talk when the house is on fire?
Well, I mean, yeah. I've got a feeling if you're in the process of trying to save a person, you
forgot
get creative.
You forgot the main part.
Hero.
So, alright, does the second book have more mental breakdowns? That's the best part of any book. When a character has a
Yeah.
mental breakdown.
It's
Yes!
you get to watch like the slow destruction of personality bits.
I love
So yeah, it's
stories that like have characters that have like
Yeah, they
mental
have
breakdowns.
quite a
Like, oh my
bit.
god, I hate my life. What am I doing in my life?
yeah, and there's fallout between Jared and Cheryl and stuff like that too.
Yes! Oh my god!
And tomorrow we have tests. See you later.